Record. Okay, well, welcome to this seminar in 2022. We're going to be looking at the subject of Marxism, a worldview called Marxism. And we're going to try and get to some contemporary issues, but we're also going to cover a bit of cultural Marxism, which is, of course, related. So here we go. We need to understand the importance of worldviews. A worldview is a set of ideas, assumptions, or beliefs about the universe, life, and all that there is. It is a lens through which we view the world. So just imagine you put on blue sunglasses. Everything looks blue or green, but it isn't. It just looks that way. So the way you view something tells you what your worldview is. So it's also a theory of reality. Where did things come from? Who are we? What's meaningful? What's real? What's moral? What's the purpose? Those big questions are summed up in worldviews. And Christianity is a worldview. Islam, Marxism is, because it has writings and authors who write in at least 10 different areas. The areas of David Noble's book, which is called Understanding the Times. So if a worldview would have authoritative writings in the area of politics, economics, law, history, etc., and Marxism certainly does. So there are three categories of worldviews. There's atheists, there's theists or theism, and pantheism. Atheism is a view there is no God. Theism is a view there is a God. And pantheism is a view that everything is God. And within that, there are three atheistic strands of atheism that appear in different ways. Secular humanism, your typical Canadian, American, Western person, a typical atheist who wants to legalize everything, including abortion, etc. You also have Marxism, which is atheism, but manifested with a particular political, economic vision. And you have postmodernism, which again is atheist, but they dominate the university departments today. And they are of the view that truth is a matter of what your particular community, whether it's LGBTQ or Native Americans or ethnic groups or groups of certain gender identity, well, how they define truth. So there's no ultimate truth except what the postmodernists say. So we're living in a real postmodern era. Well, some call it, the philosophy is wokeism, but that's certainly a part of postmodernism. And then, of course, you have your Christianity and Islam, which both have a God, and we have been talking about Islam in previous seminars. And the God of Islam, Allah, is not the same as the God of the Bible, Yahweh, any more than Dagon or Moloch or Milcom in the Bible or Baal were the same as Yahweh. So just because somebody uses the word God doesn't mean that they're talking about the same being. So the God of the Bible is loving, personal. We are to relate to him in a personal relationship. In Islam, of course, you cannot in any way have a relationship with Allah. He's not immanent, he's transcendent, and he's mainly described as being powerful, certainly not personal. And of course, how you get to heaven in Islam is a lot different than Christianity and many, many, many other areas, but we're not going to cover that. And we're not going to cover post-pantheism, cosmic humanism, of course, Hindu Buddhism, the idea that history goes around and around and around, which goes against actual science. There's no reincarnation, but we have at least 1 billion people who believe that everything goes around and comes back in some other form called reincarnation. So these are the categories in the major worldviews. There are lots of philosophies like vegetarianism or whatever, but they're not a worldview. They're a philosophy, and they don't have authoritative writings on politics, economics, and law. So these worldviews here have actual writings and authors and authority figures who write in all these areas. So that's what a worldview is. So we are looking at the components of a worldview very briefly. Ontology is the question of origins. Where did the universe come from? Epistemology is the question of truth and knowledge. What is truth? How do I know something's true? These are the very big questions all humans have to face. And they do face them. And people live their lives, so they're answering these questions, whether they like to admit it or not. Axiology, the question of morals and values, what's morally right, who determines what's right. And teleology, the question of meaning and destiny. What's the purpose of life? What does it mean? So these big philosophical questions are addressed, like I said, by every human on earth, whether they admit it or not. They're living a certain way, after a certain set of values, with a certain set of purposes, and they have ideas of what is true and what isn't. So these, I want to jump out of that now into this, some background stuff. We're going to go through a bit of background stuff because it's important. It feeds into what's happening today. There are two worldviews out of these ones I've listed that have these various stages in evolution. In Islam, you have, interestingly, 5 stages of what I call theological evolution. And Muslims all believe that, Allah spoke to Abraham, to Moses, to David, to Jesus, and then finally the highest prophet, Muhammad. And he gave writings to all these different ones. So they have a theological evolution, believing that, of course, each one was superseded by the one after it. And since Islam came after Christianity, that Islam supersedes Christianity, and that Christianity is defective because Christians are worshiping Jesus. Interestingly enough, Marxism has 5 stages. And I thought, and I've done actually a teaching on comparing Islam and Marxism in politics, and it's very fascinating, some of the terms that are used. But Marx taught, and what we have to realize is Marxism has never really been understood by people. They think Marxism means, sharing with everybody, and everybody's equal, this type of stuff. Well, you look at North Korea or China or former Soviet Union or any of these Communist Party-led places, they certainly don't share anything but misery and usually slavery. So, but these are the stages. They believe that societies evolve through beginning with slave societies to feudalism, to capitalism, to socialism, and to communism, which is the highest stage of development. So Marxists believe we are in the transition between capitalism and socialism. Some countries are socialistic or whatever, and we're not at communism yet. And just like the Muslims who believe that perfection on earth will come when Islam rules the whole earth. So they're both utopian. They both have this utopian view that Islam will make the world perfect if everybody becomes Islamic. And the communists preach the same thing, that the Communist Party are just the vanguard. They're just the guardian of the revolution, that there's no communism yet. It requires the whole earth to be ruled by the Communist Party. And then you'll have this transition to this classless, beautiful society, a utopia. So really, they're both antithetical to Christianity, which never teaches that we can produce utopia on earth. We can certainly improve things by dealing with sin, and sin is manifested in crime and politics. So if we deal with sin in human beings, we can certainly improve a society. We can bring more law. We can restore order to African tribal warfare countries. So Christianity doesn't preach utopia, because there'll be no utopia until Christ returns, until he sums up the earth. But we can certainly make an impact, because we are the salt of the earth, and salt can have an impact, and the Bible shows us that. So anyway, but Marxism is a utopian vision, and that's significant. Okay, the way you answer those 4 questions, again, these are the 10 areas that are the outworkings of your world, your 4 questions. So the way you answer, where did I come from? it feeds into your view of ethics. What's morality? And then we study the monkey so we can figure out why we do what we do. I mean, so, your view of what's truth leads to questions in sociology. What's a family? Your ideas of morality leads into politics. What kind of government should we have, etc. So these areas are the outworkings, the fruit of your main philosophical answers to those questions. Who am I? Where are we from? Where are we going? What's moral? What's my purpose? So these areas form what is your worldview. So if we gave this list to people, and I've done this, I've suggested it for a Christian school here that was looking to hire some teachers, some fresh graduates out of the University of British Columbia, which is not a Christian university, but then again, Christian universities have become, have moved away in the States radically from their original foundation. Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Berkeley, they all started out as Christian foundations, and now they're not. But so we can study any one of these areas, but these universities have been set up to teach these areas. And I asked a Christian principal who wanted to hire some teachers. I said, well, look, why don't you just give them these 10 questions on a sheet and then leave it blank and take out the white parts and just say, okay, here's 10 areas: philosophy, ethics, biology. Just write a sentence about a Christian view of each, right? Okay. He said, oh, I think I'm going to do that. So he had a bunch of people applying for teaching positions at his Christian school here. So he gave them a sheet of paper with these 10 categories and said, just briefly write down what is your Christian philosophy for each one of these. And he said, you'd be stunned, because most people could only write something about theology or maybe ethics. They couldn't really express any biblical worldview at all. They had no concept of a worldview in economics. So I think this is a test we ought to be giving out to, Christians who want jobs in Christian corporations or schools especially. What's your Christian worldview? And all Christians should have an answer in each one of these 10 areas. At least start thinking about economics or history, etc., to develop a truly comprehensive Christian worldview. Okay, I need to also bring up this important point. One of the most intriguing scriptures is Matthew 16:22. And I mean, Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are not setting your mind on God's interests, but man's." And I thought, holy smokes, imagine being Peter. Jesus spins around, points right at you, and says, "Get behind me, Satan." Now, Peter must, he's not Satan, but Jesus is clearly stating that some of our ideas can come from demonic sources. And that, in fact, Satan had planted an idea in Peter's head that Jesus recognized as purely satanic origin. And this is important because we're going to see that the origin of Marxism was an angel. Okay, and Marx said he met an angel, and the angel was called the Prince of Darkness. In his poetry, there's a number of books on his history and his writings when he was young. So keep this in mind. Jesus himself said some ideas are plants of the devil. And of course, we see it here. Joseph Smith, who started Mormonism, said he was visited by Moroni. And he wrote a book that basically is a complete antithesis of Christianity. And yet they are a cult that claim they're Christians. And they believe Jesus and Satan are brothers, that there's a mother God and a father God who have babies, spirit babies, and they have to have human bodies to inhabit. And that's why men marry as many women as they can, and women have as many babies as they can, so they can provide bodies for these spirit babies. I mean, it's unbelievably anti-Christian. And so never let a Mormon tell you he's a Christian. There's no cross on the top of a Mormon church. But my point is, or by the way, it's not a Mormon church, it's a temple. They call it a temple. So don't let them get away with the idea they're Christians or that they go to church. Joseph Smith was a nut. He never met, there's no proof he ever met an angel, and if he did, I'm sure it was a demon. And there's no evidence of his golden tablets. So you got to be careful about these worldviews or these religions that come out of the life of one person, especially if they've talked to angels. So here we have Muhammad. He said he was visited by Gabriel, and Muhammad wrote the Quran as a result. And the Quran basically depicts the Jews as enemies, and same thing with Christians. And Muhammad's launched Islam in 632 that's been hell-bent literally on destroying Christianity on the planet. So the history of Islam and the philosophy of Islam is really anti-Christian. And yet Allah is no way the God of the Bible. So it's a formidable opposition. The biggest persecutors of Christians and churches on earth are Islam. And they are infiltrating America in politics in pretty much many of the states, trying to change the laws to accommodate Islamic Sharia. It is a major, major infiltration, undermining of Western Judeo-Christian concepts. Most people aren't aware of that in the States either. Karl Marx said he heard voices and bells, and that the Prince of Darkness spoke to him. And he wrote the Communist Manifesto, which is used by Lenin to, take over the Soviet Union in 1917. Well, here's one of his poems from a book, I Believe in Satan's Downfall by Michael Green. The Fiddler, the hellish vapors rise and fill the brain till I go mad, and my heart, it utterly changed. See this sword? The Prince of Darkness sold it to me. So this guy's having some kind of physical encounter. Hellish vapors are filling his brain. He's going mad. I mean, what is this? This is not the Holy Spirit. So we need to recognize what Jesus said. Where did he get his ideas? And here's one from that same book, Ulanem. If there is something which devours, I'll leap within it. Though I bring the world to ruins, the world which bulks between me and the abyss, I will smash it to pieces with my enduring curses. I'll throw my arms around its harsh reality. Embracing me, the world will dumbly pass away and then sink down to utter nothingness, perished with no existence. That would be really living. There's something demonic about this, people. And this guy has had a revelation, and every nation from 1917 onwards that embraced Marxism is not a place you would want to live in for freedom, rights, opportunities, equality, democracy, etc. So we need to realize what demonic visits have produced on earth and where the biggest clashes, if you look at the wars that have been fought in the last century, they're against Marxist governments and Muslim ones. So Islam and Marxism are the two biggest sources of global clash, warfare, terrorism on the earth. So it's understandable if you think that Jesus was correct when he identified an idea in somebody's head that a demon had put there. Here's another one, the Pale Maiden. Thus heaven I've forfeited, I know it full well. My soul once true to God is chosen for hell. This is Karl Marx. He wrote the Communist Manifesto, and it was first published in February 21st, 1848. It's one of the world's most influential political tracts, commissioned by the Communist League and written by communist theorists Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. It laid out the League's purpose and program. The manifesto suggested a course of action for a proletariat revolution to overthrow capitalism and eventually to bring about a classless society. Communism is a dream of future utopia brought about by a proletariat revolution and ultimately leading to a classless society in which all property is publicly shared and each person works and is paid according to his or her abilities and needs. That's the theory anyway. But we need to see that from 1917 to 1990 only, there's much more since then, over 161 million people have been killed by communist revolutions and wars, from Mao Zedong in China to South Korea to Vietnam, Cambodia, to the expansion of the Soviet Union into Poland and Hungary, Czechoslovakia, etc. It's been a killing machine, and it still is. And what Putin is doing in the Ukraine is absolutely typical of military tactics by communists to just terminate everything. And people are wondering, why is he bombing apartment buildings? Why is he bombing hospitals? Well, they have no regard for what they consider their opposition. Everybody's an opponent. I mean, so we shouldn't be surprised that Putin is simply using Marxist tactics. Here's some these Marxist leaders. Pol Pot killed between 2 and 2.5 million people. And sadly, the US pulled out in 1975 and led to the further slaughter of, I think, at least close to 1 million people after the US pulled out. They had a way to win that war. They just fly a nuclear-armed bomber over Hanoi and say, you'll pull out or we'll drop it. I mean, the Soviet Union was fully involved in backing the Khmer Rouge and the North Vietnamese army, and so was China. So it was a communist-backed war, and so was South Korea. So we've been dealing with Marxism, and we still are, since 1917. Mao Zedong killed between 15 and 55. It's hard to figure out how many millions. Kim Il-sung killed at least 1.6 million. Kim Jong-un in North Korea, 2.5 million. Stalin, 9 million. Lenin, 3 million. The Communist Party of the Soviet Union killed a total of 60 million people in their purges. So why are we talking like communism's some harmless thing that's gone? It's not. And they've just done another invasion. And so we need to realize what we're dealing with. In 2008, Russian President Putin invaded Georgia, a country in the Caucasus region located in the Black Sea, during the opening ceremony of the Beijing Olympics. So remember that. And in 2014, they invaded Crimea. People did not even say boo. America did nothing about the takeover of Crimea. And you look at the geography. Crimea is that peninsula south of Ukraine. Once he took that, and nobody said boo, the Americans didn't send warships over there and said, hey, you can't take all that territory and set up your bases. They said nothing. And so within a few years, he decides, I'll just get the rest of it, Ukraine. And they won't do anything either, which America isn't. And that's a big question in my mind, why the Western world is willing to sit by and let communist countries take countries. They didn't do it in South Korea. They attempted to stop it in Vietnam, but lost the willpower. So we are living in an era where the Western world is willing to let communist countries, just communist nation, Russia, Putin is a communist, just take over. Think about it. Okay, this is hard to read, but I've got a list here. I put the website up there. Russian invasions, I could read it out. Russian invasions since 1917, and wars. Come on. Some of these are duplicated because they invaded twice. Estonia in 1918, and they also invaded Estonia in 1924. But look at this. Come on. Marxism is not a peaceful producing worldview. Never has been, never will be. They don't liberate countries, they enslave them. And certainly China is doing that today through economic warfare, buying up Canadian oil fields, American technology companies. We are indebted to China economically. I doubt that the US could even do any sanctions against China because our economy is so dependent on Chinese purchases. But anyway, look at this. This is unbelievable how much activity the Soviet, or Russia, since the Soviets are gone in 91, have been doing. There's the website. You can look it up. Marxism's foundation is atheism. Frederick Engels declared, we want to sweep away everything that claims to be supernatural and superhuman. For the root of all untruth and lying is the pretension of the human and the natural to be superhuman and supernatural. For that reason, we have once and for all declared war on religion and religious ideas and care little whether we are called atheists or anything else. So I'm telling you that you think of what communist parties have done to Christians in China or the Soviet Union previously. I went to the Soviet Union in 1980 on an outreach at the Olympic Games, and they proudly showed us the church in Red Square that was turned into a museum. So it is atheist to the core. Lenin made it clear. Every religious idea, every idea of God, even flirting with the idea of it, is unutterable vileness, vileness of the most dangerous kind, contagion of the most abominable kind. Millions of sins, filthy deeds, active violence, and physical contagions are far less dangerous than the subtle spiritual idea of a God decked out in the smartest ideological costumes. Every defense or justification of the idea of God, even the most refined, the best intentioned, is a justification of reaction. For Marx, humanity is God. We created God in our image. We created a religion in order to worship ourselves. Marx boasted, man is the highest being for man. Marx complained that this view means the end, Marx explains, the end of all religion. The criticism of religion ends with the teaching that man is the highest being for man. Let's look at some of the presuppositions, some of the ideas that guide Marxism. And I dare say most people can't articulate the philosophical foundation of Marxism. And I would repeat, if you ask any young person today, even in a Christian high school, do they know what Marxism is? They have no idea. We are not even teaching about this worldview. We're just buying all our products from China in Walmart, and we're quite happy. While we arm China, which has threatened the US, threatened to retake Taiwan and Japan, and flexes its military muscle in the face of the US and keeps North Korea well armed. I mean, we are dealing with an enemy, and we have basically economically fed our enemy. So I truly am of the idea we should repatriate as much of our business as we can. And I liked what President Trump did. He was trying to bring American businesses back to the US. But anyway, that's another issue. So one of the presuppositions is pure materialism. The second is that nature acts dialectically. In other words, Marx taught that nature itself, atoms and molecules, have this mechanism in them, this machinery, the ghost in the machine, that literally, physically moves societies. We are all just machines, materialism, okay? Picture yourself, you're just a bunch of molecules and chemicals. You're a machine, like the tree, and nature has this machine built into a program that juggles it along in evolution. Okay, now the atheists are teaching evolution, right? But not this kind of evolution. This is dialectical, that this machine, you're a machine, is moving along in evolutionary ways in society and politics. That there's a higher form of politics that the machine, evolution, is moving us toward, and economics. So they applied the ideas of evolution out of biology into politics and economics and sociology, and says, well, societies evolve mechanistically. So the dialectical is this idea that history is moving forward, and then there's some kind of clash that comes in, an antithesis. Like, the Marxists want to launch a war. So then America comes in and challenges them in Vietnam. And as a result, there's a spin-off called a synthesis. And the synthesis then becomes the next thesis, which generates its antithesis. So that basically the idea, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And this is taught, that's the way history moves. So Marxists are not afraid of causing revolutions or invasions, because they know there'll be opposition. But they know that if dialectic is true, the outcome will always be positive for them. So they are willing to launch revolutions and invasions, and they get away with it. Look at Crimea. Nobody said anything. Look at Georgia. Nobody said anything. So they've taken back some of their former territory before Ukraine. So as I said, they believe in a social, political evolution, and that whenever they bring a change, progress is inherent within that. So they believe they can't lose. Evolution is going to reward any action they do, because they believe in revolution is the mechanism that causes evolution to drive forward towards their goal, which they claim will be a communist-led world. They believe evolution is leading to a communist-run world. That's what they believe is science. They taught that was science, that evolution's true, but socio-political evolution is as true as biological evolution. So these presuppositions are powerful, and they guide the mindset of people like Putin and all the communists before him, and Mao Zedong and Xi Jinping and all that, and Kim Jong-un. Behaviorism provides the mechanism for human progress. So they believe we're just a machine, and that you can program the machine. Okay, and that's why they send people to re-education camps. And that's why Solzhenitsyn wrote about the Gulag Archipelago, about these re-education. How many millions of people in China and North Korea have been sent to re-education camps because they want to reprogram the machine so you think like you think Marxism. It's based on materialism. There's no free will, so there's no. There's a dilemma in the Marxist view, because if you're a machine, you wouldn't have free will. So if you don't have free will, how can you choose to move towards communism? So they overcame it, this dilemma of free will by saying, well, you choose the type of society you want, and then that creates the socio-political move towards the communist utopia. So they taught that the answer to that problem of free will was that the dialectical relationship between thought and speech transcend behaviorism. We gain the capacity to shape society as we see fit. So free will for these early Marxists was having the liberty to choose the type of society that will then determine your behavior. So they believe that society shapes your behavior, not the other way around. That's why they were completely into controlling all aspects of their society before the internet and before Wi-Fi opened up the world, and communists could get out of their country from China and go study in the US and think, hey, wait a minute, communism's not that good, so, but the Communist Party is alive and well in China, and I'm sure the Soviet Union or Russia as well. The communist society will therefore elicit proper behavior leading to mental health. So you know what that means. You'll follow the communist ideology or you'll be shot, comrade. Marxist law is proletariat, the absolute rule of the Communist Party. Lenin said the state is an organ of class domination, an organ of oppression of one class by another. And by the way, Putin has ordered the poisoning of a number of people who opposed him. And I think the last one was Litvinenko, that guy who was poisoned by some of they have no problems executing, poisoning, or making people disappear who don't accept the rule of the state and so right now in Russia, people are being arrested and rounded up for criticizing Putin's invasion of the Ukraine. Their Marxist sociology, human beings are nothing more than what society makes them. Our material condition will determine what we become, not your aspirations. Religion's a stumbling block. They have a war against the church, certainly in China, North Korea, etc. And care of children is the role of the state, not the parents. By the way, that's a scary thought, because that's becoming kind of accepted in the United States. If we don't get on school boards and tell the state that parents have the role, not the state will fill the void. We see that in Canada too. The government is increasingly coming down with rules and what type of books these kids will read. And we're getting perverted books in our schools, in our public schools, that the government is deciding that's normal, And so we got to realize, if you want to have a generation of children go through schools with relatively free thinking, you better create a good Christian school or start impacting the state's role in education through school boards. Their socio-political objective, Marx believed that we are God. He also believed we must seize control of reality and shape it to our specifications. Because the institutions of society rested on a foundation of theism, Marx determined to change all social institutions and reestablish them on atheistic foundations. And you know what, folks? Some of the postmodernist stuff going on today, what we call the Great Reset, is got some scary parallels with this. As Christianity's become the enemy, it's become the religion of oppressors, the religion of colonializers, the religion of white privileged men. So we need to realize that Marxism is not just a political or military expression. It has philosophical inroads. And we're going to see that through some of the wokeism ideology. So Marx and Engels in the Communist Manifesto called for the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. Cultural Marxism, we're going to shift a bit now to that, relies on Marxist ideology as the basis for continuing academic and intellectual efforts to subvert Western culture, that is, institutions, family, social structure, and definition. So we are in an era not only of military and political Marxism, as we just in the midst of an invasion of Ukraine, and previous to that, Crimea, previous to that, Georgia. We've just watched we've watched Putin just basically retake some of his lost territories at the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. But this cultural Marxism is undermining ideas, values, truth, etc. in the Western world. So let's take a look at it. Marxists believe the most humane thing they can do is to usher in a socialistic society. The most desirable goal for the proponents of these worldviews is the creation of a utopian society in which our perfect nature can flourish. Towards this end, they call for major revisions to the traditional family unit. The Communist Manifesto derides as bourgeois the traditional unit of father, mother, and child. Acting on this mandate, Communist Russia established free love associations and sanctioned lax abortion law to break down the basic family unit. Marxists dominate university departments. I recommend this book by David Horowitz, The Professors, the 101 Most Dangerous Academics in America. I have that book, and it is an excellent book. David Horowitz was formerly an extreme leftist who decided to rethink his position, and he got out of it and realized the danger to the West is leftism. So this book illustrates, and he names them, and he describes their courses on major campuses. I don't know if I've got it. Oh, here it is, right here. The Professors by David Horowitz. And I've highlighted some of these professors from different universities in America, the 101 most dangerous professors. So our young people who go to university, and I dare say many Christian universities are penetrated with critical race theory. We're going to see this cultural Marxism. So I encourage you to get this book. Cultural Marxism, some of the organizations are BLM, Black Lives Matter. Marxists will use existing movements, or even the church. You know, the church was infiltrated in South America with liberation theology back in the 60s and 70s. That means people might remember liberation theology, when basically Marxists convinced people, Catholics in Central and South America, that the only way that Jesus would have truly liberated people was overthrow the government. So there's lots of revolutions down there. And the church fell victim to this liberation ideology. And Black Lives Matter is just a cover for some of this cultural Marxism. Black Lives Matter co-founder Patrisse Cullors said in 2015 that she and her fellow organizers are trained Marxists. Cullors, 36, was the protege of Eric Mann, former agitator of the Weather Underground domestic terror organization, spent years absorbing the Marxist-Leninist ideology that shaped her worldview. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories. And I think that what we really try to do is build a movement that could be utilized by many, many Black folk. She became a trained organizer with the Labor Community Strategy Center, which uses grassroots organization to focus on Black and Latino communities with deep historical ties to the long history of anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, pro-communist resistance to the U.S. empire. So this gives you some of the idea of how they infiltrate and take over movements that may have, even unions, which may have started out as a useful thing to provide rights for workers. Unions, even to this day, have really anti-establishment, tear down and oppose the government of the day mentality. We have that here in BC with the BC Teachers Union, Teachers Federation. It also expresses its appreciation for the work of the U.S. Communist Party, especially black communists, as well as its support for the great work of the Black Panther Party, written up in New York Post, June 2020. Alicia Garza and other founders of the Black Lives Matter organizations are committed Marxists, according to that PolitiFact, July 2020. Garcia sits atop a worldwide revolutionary empire, starting with Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation that she started, which now has 15 chapters in the US and more in Canada, Australia, Europe. Garza is also behind the Movement for Black Lives with its 50 domestic organizations. The Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation removed Marxist language from its website. Black Lives Matter removed a section of text that had been under a section called What We Believe that sought to engender the destruction or perhaps reimagining of the nuclear family structure. The communist term, I got to move this, the communist term comrades has also been airbrushed out of their documents. The Chinese Progressive Association, with branches in San Francisco, Boston, and New York, used ethnic pride, racial grievance, and Chinese nationalism to draw thousands of young Chinese Americans into the revolutionary pro-Beijing orbit. We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages that collectively care for one another. Black Lives Matter has been criticized for appearing to tolerate violent demonstrations in its name, for stoking racial tensions, and for creating an unsafe environment for police. Other critics say BLM pushes a left-wing extremist agenda under the false appearance of a moderate reformist movement. The BLM organizations were never about affirming the foundational truth of equality for all Americans. They want wholesale submission to their devastating ideology. In 2016, the Ford Foundation announced plans to fund the M4BL Movement for Black Lives in a 6-year investment plan. The Democracy Alliance was created in 2005 by a handful of major donors, including billionaire financier George Soros and the Taco Bell heir Rob McKay, to build a permanent infrastructure to advance liberal ideas and causes. Donors are required to donate at least $200,000 a year to recommended groups, and their combined donations to those groups now total more than $500 million. Members also give heavily to Democratic politicians. It's all under the guise of changing the family structure. Think of that. So here are some financial supporters of Black Lives Movement. You can look at them all: Microsoft, Nintendo, Peloton, Rabbit, Robinhood, Airbnb, A16, Bumble, Cisco, Grubhub, DocuSign, DoorDash, Ease, Etsy, Grindr, IBM, Uber, Techno, Shopify, Salesforce, etc. Alicia Garcia is now a multi-millionaire. She started Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter received $90 million in 2020. Another aspect of Marxism is white privilege. Again, using existing ideas as leverage to bring down the destruction of Western civilization and replace it with a Marxist view, certainly with the family and morals, etc. So white privilege are the relative advantages racism affords to people identified as white, whether white people recognize them or deny them. To be white is to be afforded one's individuality, afforded the presumption of innocence, afforded the assumption of intelligence, afforded empathy when crying or raging, afforded disproportionate amounts of policymaking power, afforded opportunity from a white network, afforded wealth-building homes and resource-rich schools. Now, that's from the Merriam-Webster Dictionary of white privilege. So the idea is people who are white are racist because they're white, because they brought colonialism to these countries, which has oppressed Black people and Native people. And we have all these privileges. White people are granted rights, whether they're subtle or obvious, immunities and opportunities by their skin color, regardless of whether they asked for that privilege or not. Critical race theory, again, is huge in its impact. And recently here in Canada, in my town, our school district used a critical race theory and a speaker to come in and describe how our our structure is full of systemic racism and discrimination. And they use critical race theory as the basis for analyzing the district. And some of us said, hey, this theory is flawed. It views white people as racist automatically. And so this is what it's about. Critical race theory is an intellectual movement, a loosely organized framework of legal analysis based on the premise that race is not a natural biologically grounded feature of physically distinct subgroups of human beings, but a socially constructed, in other words, a culturally invented category that is used to oppress and exploit people of color. Critical race theorists hold that the law and legal institutions in the United States are inherently racist insofar as they function to create and maintain social, economic, and political inequalities between whites and non-whites, especially African Americans. So basically, we are now being told by critical race theorists, and it's embedded in education now, it's embedded by governments, that we have to undo all these socially constructed categories. And because we're white, we're oppressors, colonialists, and particularly First Nations have all been abused because of our skin color. And in Canada, they're really looking at the live-in schools that Natives attended here in Canada, the residential schools. And that means we have to correct all the wrongs of history. Now, history is full of wrongs, but how far do you want to go back? So we have to be careful how we view things and correct where we should and just not where it's not based in a proper analysis. And cancel culture, this is huge. That anybody who happens to speak in a way or have an idea that goes against critical race theory is going to be canceled. Canceling and cancel culture have to do with the removing of support for public figures in response to their, quote, objectionable behavior or opinions. This can include boycotts or refusal to promote their work. This is huge. Businesses are terrified if they don't perhaps fly a rainbow flag or fund LGBTQ causes, that they can be blacklisted, they can be canceled. People can have a mass movement against their business. This is powerful. On the job to cancel people out, whether they're Hollywood movie stars, if they slip up and say something. Oh, I was thinking of the guy, I don't know his name now, but he ran that show. I'll have to think of it. It wasn't Survivor. Anyway, The Bachelor. Okay, I don't know if you ever watched it, but anyway, women competing for one guy or many men competing for a girl's attention in a series. Anyway, he made one slip up. He was moderator of the show. Oh, Chris Harrison. That's it. He was moderator of the show for many, many years. He made one little statement somewhere that appeared to be either, racist in some way, which it may not have been, or against a particular ethnic group, which it may not have been. And they basically fired him. They just fired him. He was done, taken right out of that show series. So cancel culture is huge, and people are terrified of this in business and in politics, etc. The mass withdrawal of support from public figures or celebrities who have done things that, quote, aren't socially accepted today. This practice of canceling or mass shaming often occurs on social media platforms such as Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. And you can look up cultural Marxism through the Frankfurt School and critical theory. Okay, I'm going to take a look at our time here. I think what I'll do is real quickly go through this, just comparing in those 10 areas. I'll put it up as a chart and you can see it, how biblical Christianity compares to Marxist-Leninism. In theology, Marxists are atheists. Philosophy, they're dialectical materialists. We believe in supernaturalism, that there's both a supernatural realm and a natural. Ethics, we have absolutes. They have the proletariat morality. In biology, Christianity is creation, and they believe in a punctuated evolution, that they can indeed sort of push evolution along by revolutionary activities or invasions. Psychology, who is man? The Bible teaches we have a body, but we're more than a body. We're dualistic. We have non-physical parts like our mind, our heart, our spirit, but we are fallen. Marxist-Leninists teach monism. We are a machine, and behaviorism is the ideology or philosophy they have in psychology, that we can control this machine by creating a society that then shapes the machine's thinking. Sociology teaches traditional home, church, and state. They teach a classless society. Law, we believe in biblical and natural law. God has created the world with natural laws, of course, but also moral laws, and the Ten Commandments reflect some of that. They believe in the law put out by the Communist Party. So literally, nobody wants to oppose Putin. If you oppose Putin in the Soviet Union, in Russia, you will be executed or disappear or lose everything. And so, it is a proletariat law. What Putin says goes. Nobody checked him on invading Crimea. Nobody stopped him on his invasion of Ukraine. Politics, justice, freedom, and order for biblical Christianity. They believe in statism and the communist world government. And China, North Korea, and Russia promote any political situation that will oppose the Judeo-Christian West, or particularly America. So they will arm Iran. They will, because Iran is against the US. I mean, it's Putin who's supplying nukes, nuclear technology to Iran. And China's involved there too. It is Soviet Union that supported all the poison gas to Syria and how they gassed their people under their president there. So, and we need to realize that, again, in politics, communist-led countries do not promote freedom and order. They promote tyranny and takeover. In economics, we believe in the stewardship of property. They believe in socialism. In history, we believe in the resurrection and the ultimate summing up of history. They believe in historical materialism leading towards communistic run utopia. So these are big differences between Marxism and Christianity. Fyodor Dostoevsky said, the problem of communism is not an economic problem. The problem of communism is the problem of atheism. Marxism is a good idea on paper that never worked in practice. And I want to show you how democracies decline from bondage to spiritual faith. This is how they start: from faith to great courage, from courage to liberty, from liberty to abundance, from abundance to complacency, from complacency to selfishness, from selfishness to apathy, from apathy to dependency, and from dependency back again into bondage. So I think we are somewhere around this abundance and complacency, living on the backs of the people who fought for our freedom in World War II and other places. We are complacent. We are fat and full of abundance, which is leading to selfishness. And our civilizations are in a serious decline. And we see very clear signs that China and now Putin are taking clear advantage of this kind of hesitancy in the Western mind. And certainly in Canada, with our Prime Minister, who just adores China and considers their model of social credit score, where Chinese citizens get a score based on what their behavior is, and you're allowed to go to certain places or buy certain things or get into certain institutions depending on your social score. We are perhaps heading in that direction. Using the pretext of the coronavirus to monitor and control everybody and ID everyone. So anyway, but we are certainly complacent, and young people do not know where their freedom came from. We are not teaching where our freedom came from. And in Canada, we have just witnessed the government enact the Emergencies Act, which has never before in the history of this country been enacted, and is usually only reserved for extreme danger in a time of war, to basically bring a level of control down upon truckers who were marching peacefully and protesting peacefully in Ottawa with Canadian flags, to imprison the leader, to confiscate bank accounts of people, to restrict people's movements. We are living in a time, if we are going to be complacent, that we will lose our freedom under the guise of the government looking after you and what is it, helping everyone have health. So using health as a pretext to get power and control over people. Okay, so what we'll do is I actually did finish, and I'm going to stop the